Okay, now we're going to face it off and chamfer it. Now we're ready to tap it. All right, we have our plug machine. Let's try it, see if it fits in the chuck. And that's a nice slip fit. That's exactly what I want. Ended up having to make it about 8 thousandths smaller because the roughness in the chuck and also the part that I made is not a real super smooth finish. Nonetheless, it'll work. So now we're going to move on to putting the 4-jaw chuck on, setting up the stop, and running the clevis. Okay, now we're ready to touch off our tools. I got a rougher and a finisher. My rougher is in tool position 1. My finisher is in tool position 2. We got to set our work shift off of tool number 1. Okay, now we're touched off, got our Z position to start. Okay, now we're ready to set up our work shift. We're touched off with our roughing tool number 1. My tool, it happens to be tool number 1 in my situation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, but I'll get into that a little bit later. The first thing I want to do is set up the work shift. So I'm going to go to offset settings. I'm going to navigate to the measurement under the Z tab. I'm going to put 0, input plus. And now you can see it's Z. Everything's going to work off of this tool position. So the next thing we got to do is set up our diameter. Now we're going to turn a small section and set our X diameter for tool number 1. Okay, without moving the tool in X, we're going to measure it and input the values. Okay, now we've turned a section, we've measured it, we got 1.565. We want to make sure we're in the geometry tab. Now we're going to arrow over to X and we're going to input that value, and we must do it with the letter X in front of it. So we're going to go X 1.565 and we're going to use the measured. Okay, tool number 1 is set. Now we're going to do the same thing for tool number 2 with our finisher. This is a V&MG 432. We're going to touch the face first. Okay, now we have our Z position for tool number 2. The next thing we're going to do is turn the diameter a little bit and measure it. Now we're going to set up tool 2. We just touched the face, so we're going to navigate to tool number 2 under the Z column. We're going to type in letter Z, 0, and measured. Okay, again, without moving the tool in X, we're going to input those values for tool number 2. Okay, we've made a light pass with tool number 2. We took about 5 more thousandths off. So we're going to go to our offset geometry screen under tool number 2, under the X column. We're going to type in X 1.560, hit the measured key. That gives us our offset. One thing that I want to point out here, if you notice, I've got T0000 offset in priority now. The only other way this would work, because I'm using tool number 1, is when I started touching off my tools. This could be tool 1. It could be tool 0101, but it cannot be any other number. So it's good practice to clear this out before you start touching off any tools. Typically, when you first boot up the machine, this is going to be all zeroed out in the first place. So that's a good place to start. Have you had another number in there other than tool 0 or tool 1, everything would be ruined. Okay, we have our program loaded. All of our tools are touched off, 1 and 2. I got one last thing I want to do is I'm going to enter my offset settings and go to my wear screen and add 10 thousandths to the part. Now, this is by no means a precision job, but if this is good practice and how you should approach any setup on a CNC lathe. This way I can dial it. If it were a precision part, this gives me the ability to not scrap my part, for one, and 2, dial in with that last 10 thousandths by leaving my part big. So I'm going to start off and go to my offset settings. I'm going to go to my offsets, enter my wear screen, and under tool number 1, I'm going to go 0.01, input plus. Scroll down tool number 2, do the same thing, 0.01, input plus. Now you can see I've got 10 thousandths in both. So if this were a precision part again, it gives me the ability to not scrap it, for one, and then dial in to that size that I want to be.